America has been independent for 247 years, but there are many sad facts behind the history of America. In this special video, we're going to talk about 5 main topics, which are how the papacy has been persecuting for 1,260 years, and how did it result to the Pilgrims. How does Roger Williams came to the North America and is as listed in Revelation 12, which shows the involvement of God in our history. Going back to the Dark Ages, or as some people say, the medieval, the papacy holds a supreme power in Europe. The papacy is known to be the leader of a Roman Catholic Church. As for the modern times, Vatican City, the smallest country in the world, is still held by the Pope as the head of the country. Now let's dive deeper about the papacy. The papacy was first begun in the era of St. Peter, although there is no evidence showing that he was the first Roman bishop, but he was recognized by the Christian leaders. By the end of the 2nd century, there is a patron theory saying that Jesus Christ has chosen Peter as his representative on earth. So how does these Europeans came to America? Well, it was the Justinian who gave the Roman bishop head all of the churches. This brings us to the fact that they will rule all over the churches of Europe. This brings us to the conclusion that they can do whatever they want. The papacy claimed that they are infallible, meaning they will never be wrong. If you give someone the right to do anything, most likely they will not even care of what they are doing. It is the same back in the day of the government system of the papacy. They acted like the landlord, holding this huge power in people's life, ruling over their activities, impacting their culture and affecting their politics. This is called the papal supremacy. During their time of life, the absolute control is the type of government they had. Absolute control, or is also known as absolute monarchy, is when only the wealthy people such as the king and queen can rule over the nation with no limitations. However, though, only the churches could interpret and has access to the Bible. This brings us to the fact that in the Dark Ages, the elites were the one who can decide of what to do and what not to do for the people. As we have seen, only the wealthy people could make changes in this society. They are titled as the ruling elite. The ruling elite consists of the Pope, a king or queen, aristocrats, and the people who inherited a high social rank. These people, which made up less than 5% of the population, could control all over the land. On the other hand, the poor will seek their labor or rented land from the rich to farm. The famous Black Death happened in the times of the papacy. It almost killed 20 million people in Europe, which approximately made up of 30% of their population. This is because in the era of the papacy, people who investigate and seek for scientific evidence, like Galileo Galilei, will be risked to be persecuted, as the priests don't like people who doesn't follow their understanding of the Bible. The Protestant Reformation is an important event in the United States history. It took part in the 16th century. The leaders of this Reformation are Martin Luther and John Calvin. Martin Luther was a German monk and a professor, whereas John Calvin was a French lawyer and a pastor. As during that time the nation was ruled by the papacy, many manipulations were done to the church, making it wealthy and lesser towards its spirituality. In this era, they sold indulgences. Indulgences is what the papacy sold to people by saying that their sins will be forgiven if they seek the priest and give money to church. Martin Luther held his grudges after the indulgences by making the famous 95 Theses. He written how the Pope had no authority and foundation in the gospel. He even translated the Bible into different languages, remembering the fact that he has access to the Bible as a monk. John Calvin, as was told before, was a French lawyer. He agreed with Martin Luther's idea on justification by faith, as John Calvin was able to have an experiment of an elect in a disciplined community he believed that is a better place rather than Luther's. Overall, the Protestant Reformation spread to other European countries, making people think they can self-govern themselves as they have their own opinion and relationship with God through the Bible. This Reformation challenged the authority of the Pope and the indulgences that they sold. Due to the Church of England's adherence to the church or state structure that the papacy instituted, Pilgrims and Puritans desired to break away from it. So these men who urged for separation, which one of them was the great-grandfather of James White, escaped, separating themselves fully from the Church of England. They then went to Holland in 1607. However, their life in Holland isn't as beautiful as they pictured. Economy, incomes, and culture were too precious to be forgotten. In order for them to tackle this situation, some of them then shipped by the Mayflower to Massachusetts. On their way to Massachusetts, they made an agreement called the Mayflower Compact. Mayflower Compact formed a body politic that was signed to enact and enforce law. By this government, they succeeded to make a colony named the Plymouth. This colony maintained itself independently until 1691, where it became a part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony due to its instability. Looking back to how the Plymouth treated the Native Americans, they shared knowledge on farming, and as a result, this inspired the Thanksgiving event that we have now. Moving on to Roger Williams, who was the founder of the popular Rhode Island. He was a Puritan minister who graduated from the Cambridge University. As Williams arrived in Boston in 1631, he refused to join in the Anglicans Puritans and moved to the Plymouth colony in the New England. He was a pastor in the Plymouth, but then he came back to Salem after a disagreement with Plymouth, in which he insisted that the king's patent was invalid and that only direct purchase from the Native Americans gave title to the land. As he was there in the colony, he spoke out his belief were the purity of church and state and freedom from coercion in matters of faith. Due to this belief, he was banished from the Salem colony. In January 1636, Williams set out for Narragansett Bay. He purchased the land from them and built Rhode Island. Rhode Island is the first colony in New England to have and to practice religious liberty. The government will not interfere with any religious matter, especially with churches. Many people came to Rhode Island to escape persecution, and William accepted them by open arms. To close this video, we will talk about one last topic derived from the question, how does the Bible have connection with the United States history? Looking back to what we talked before, United States is basically made up of people who demanded for religious liberty. They wanted to have their own belief regarding the Bible. In this conclusion part, we will discuss specifically Revelation 12 verses 15 to 17. Revelation 12 verses 15 to 17 said, "And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman. And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." This particular verses is describing how the Pilgrims, or the Pilgrims' Father as they called, came to the North America. They came to North America as by that time they were seeking for religious freedom. God granted their prayer and blessed them joyfully, sending his angels to protect them. However, the Pilgrims' Father did not comprehend the religious liberty completely. They were still thinking to survive individually rather than as a team. Neither of them tolerate the religious liberty, as well as following the Bible, as they were also threatening the Indians. Because this is not what God favored, they were persecuted. 11 years after, Roger Williams set foot on the new colony. Soon after, he became a well-respected, faithful minister, but his demand for religious liberty in the colony couldn't be borne by the colony, affecting him to be banished. This is where the Revelation 12 verse 15 to 17 started. William made his way to the Narragansett Bay, making the foundation of Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a place which fully have a practice of religious liberty. As said in Revelation 12 verse 15, "And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood." The serpent describes the papacy, how they treat people so unkindly and how they were very violent towards them. The water represents people and the nations that the papacy used to destroy God's people, the woman and his pure church. In this case, God's people were the Pilgrim's Father and Roger Williams himself, who believed that the church has to be fully separated from the state as it was being too corrupted. In verse 16 he said, "And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth." The earth represented New England, how it provided an uncivilized place for the new colony, and Roger Williams, the woman. Last but not least, in verse 17 it was stated, "And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which kept the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." As Roger Williams made his way into the new colony, he ended up getting banished from by the supposedly God's people, by his thought that the Pilgrims did not have a full practice for religious liberty, so they banished him, who is truly following the will of God. In this particular video, we have divided into some sections: the papacy, the Protestant Reformation, the Pilgrims, Roger Williams, and how is the Bible connected to the United States history. Thank you for listening, and see you in another chance.